I talk a lot about Touhou LostWord's story, so let's switch things up a bit. LostWord's tower rocks, and is by far the best bit of gameplay LostWord has. But there's a bit more in its design than it's just hard. First off, the tower actually forces you to use the game's mechanics. Now, let me be clear, this isn't exactly a good thing. I wish more of the game did this since, well, that's how most video games work. In Touhou LostWord, a lot of normal levels simply fly by from you using your strongest attacks to breeze through. In the tower, that doesn't work. For one, enemy HP is much higher, so now your most powerful attacks generally aren't enough to simply power through the enemies. But say you can power through a floor with your last word attacks. Well, your used spell cards, skill cooldowns, barriers, and HP carry over to the next floor, and the only way to get them back is to heal your entire party with a full heal. Moreover, you only get one free full heal a day, so spamming attacks will eventually get you stuck. You now have to actually try to break the enemy's barriers or work out a stall strategy to beat the level. Now on the flip side, this might actually seem a bit too hard. If the enemies have this much HP, then can you really get through all of the floors with the non-healing I mentioned before? Well, this is where the second cool aspect of the tower comes in. Like you, the enemy's HP and used barriers also carry over. For the first time in LostWord, you can take on the same level with multiple parties. And the best thing to come from this? With the limited heals and multiple parties, every character becomes useful. In a lot of gacha games, if you pull a 3-star character, you might never use them in the game at all. At the beginning of LostWord, using characters like Cerno or Lily White seemed like a bit of a waste after you got stronger friends. But now, those characters become extremely valuable. There are characters that can do more damage than Cerno, yeah, but you might want to save them for later floors. Plus, Cerno can freeze enemies and break some of their barriers with water. Barrier breaks are often the key to winning tower floors because when an enemy's barrier is broken, you do 4 times the amount of damage. So it becomes important to have access to all the elements. This increased importance of elements makes many characters more useful. For example, the previously useless Luna Child now has the valuable Moon element on her spell cards to use on enemies. And Raisin becomes way more valuable since she has an instant Moon Break. But characters that focus on power are still important because they're often the ones you'll use to finish enemies off after their barriers are broken. LostWord's tower doesn't shift what characters are useful. Instead, it manages to make almost everyone useful, which is no easy feat. Think of it like an equalizer. On floor 41, I use Seiran, who's currently considered the worst character in the game. But her AoE Moon Element spell card was an essential attack for me to use in order to beat the floor. Every character becomes a potential part of the many possible ways you can beat floors, which is really cool. Now when I summon a duplicate of a fairy, I don't feel that sad anymore. I know I can use them in the tower later. Lastly in gameplay, there's routing. The tower allows you to do practice runs with no stamina, so you can get a strategy in place. Let me take you through my thought process for floor 41. Every character on this floor is weak to the Moon element, so I brought in a ton of Moon attackers along with Flandre so I could give Raisin a power boost on switch-in. Yomi's last word lets her do an attack on every enemy with the Moon element, so my plan is to break all the enemy's barriers so I can use Yomi's attack on all of them. I switched my characters at very specific moments. After I used Luna Child's most efficient Moon cards, I switched to Seiran. With Patch, I used all her Moon spell cards, so then I switched to Yomu. But then, Raisin is still in the middle the entire time. What if she loses all her barriers and gets killed by the enemy? Well, the odds of her dying are fairly low, but on the off chance that she does die, I can reset. In the tower, if you quit out of a floor, both your party and the enemy's party resets to how it was before the floor, and you only lose the stamina points you spent to play the floor. This means that provided you have the stamina, bad luck will not stop you from beating the floor. Your party status, as well as the enemy status, only saves if you beat the level or retreat after 5 turns. So, after getting an attempt where Raisin didn't die, I was able to break every enemy's barriers at the same time using my characters, including Seiran. I then used Raisin and Yomu's LostWord's to deal a ton of damage, and was left with only Yukari. I retreated to conserve my characters in case I needed them later, and switched to Reimu. Since Yukari had so little health left, and since Reimu has the ability to restore her own barriers, and also has high defensive stats, I was able to beat Yukari. Of all the characters I used, only Reimu and Yomu are considered S tier by the fanbase. Every other character I used was B tier or lower. And planning out all of this took around an hour. This game is free to play, and 1 floor out of 50 got me this much engagement. I always have fun when the tower's around, because it gives me a chance to use my new characters. I got to use Satori for the first time in this tower with her fire cards. And you'll likely have a lot of units because LostWord gives out a lot of free friend summons. Even if your units aren't S tier, as demonstrated by my previous team, you can definitely still make things work. Plus, Reimu's given for free, and recently, so is Medicine. So, you should always have access to at least one uber powerful friend. There's hours of fun to be had from playing the tower, but gameplay isn't the only good thing about it. The tower's presentation is also handled in a pretty cool way. Story-wise, we get what I like to call diegetic gameplay mechanics. Now, that's not really the right word to use. The term diegetic is used when music from a piece of media is actually part of the media's world. For example, Touhou 15.5's final boss theme is diegetic because the Prism River Sisters and Raiko are actually playing the song as the fight goes on. Here, Yukari explains the importance of game mechanics in a way that integrates them into the story. In one section, Yukari explains that humans can survive attacks from yokai by subconsciously using barriers around themselves. The same barriers used in gameplay against elements and to graze attacks. These talks about game mechanics help to separate the tower's story from the rest of the game. But there's another thing that the tower does really nicely presentation-wise. It often serves as a preview for upcoming content. This time around, we got to fight against Yuki on floor 49. She wasn't in any other level before this, and she isn't even summonable yet, so aside from just the seal crystals, gold, free prayers, and the other material rewards you gain along the way, you also get a nice preview of what's coming into the game next. With a bit of clever game design, the tower provides a solid challenge to the player, while also expanding the practicality of every character in the game. Along with solid presentation, the tower offers LostWord's best gameplay by far.